Good morning and welcome to this edition of Getting to Smart. I'm Peter Murray and I'm your host today. I want to welcome Tyler Svitak from the Colorado Smart Cities Alliance. Hello, Tyler. Thank you for joining this morning. And before we get started, I must do my little commercial here, if everyone bears with me. I want to bring up Omnia, which is a wonderful program that is offered through Gray Bar. It's a cooperative purchasing agreement. It allows over 98,000 agencies where you can apply for submit RFPs and procurements without going through all the red tape because it's a federally competed contract, and it has been used over and over again. I'm shocked at how many times I'm with a city or a county and we're talking about procurement and I bring this up and they say they already use it. So again, cooperative purchasing and the types of projects that are or products that you can purchase, everything from electrical to datacom. And myself, I have a long history of buying cable and wireless gear from our folks at Gray Bar. So thank Gray Bar for sponsoring us. And to get in touch with them, reach out to them at omniapartners.com/Gray Bar. So thank you again to Gray Bar. And sorry for the commercial there, Tyler, but welcome.
No, it's actually serendipitous because we used Omnia to buy our private 5G CBRS network at the university here. So very relevant.
Oh, and you have, oh, good. I'm going to come back to that one because you already have a private, my personal favorite innovation is the private 5G right in the networking space. So we'll come up to that. But again, I want to thank you for joining us. I've had the pleasure of being in a number of meetings and presentations with you. I would say, without a doubt, your group is the most hands-on and project-oriented that I've seen of the innovation accelerators, if that's a fair term to use for what you guys do, conveners, ecosystem builders. But that said, can you describe a little bit about your organization and the things you offer?
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you so much for having us, Peter. So I'm the executive director of the Colorado Smart Cities Alliance, which was the first statewide smart cities ecosystem in the country, and now is the largest. We have about 39 cities, counties, utilities, metro districts, even libraries that we work with. And my job is to really source their needs, the challenges that they're facing in their community, and then to go out into the world and explore where solutions might exist, and bring them here to Colorado to try and to test. And if they work, then we also use this ecosystem to scale and replicate those things to the scale that it's going to take for infrastructure to improve. And so we have a number of programs that I'm happy to walk through today that allow us to do that. And we are very project focused because we believe that there's a lot of learning that needs to take place both in government, but also in the private sector. How do you work with government? It's a big challenge. They don't always have aligned goals, and projects allow them to come together and prove things in the real world. And that's the best learning, right? Experiential. And so we have about 78 projects that we've been able to generate, testing all sorts of innovations to all sorts of challenges facing government. And now we're also part of a national ecosystem I hope we talk about with my peers like Jen in North Texas, who I know you're going to be interviewing, to learn from each other and what's happening in each region of the country.
And that's essential to I think to growth is that collaboration across groups, whether it's regional or national or international. I've just seen just tremendous work from the group that you collaborate with, and I think it's no accident that sort of the cream of the crop all are collaborating and sharing best practices. So
yeah, and I think innovation ecosystems or alliances are relatively common at this point. I think having a neutral kind of nonprofit that's bridging the divide between government and business is really helpful. But at the end of the day, like, I'm not the one actually doing the innovation, right? We're influencing our governments to work with us. We're bringing those champions for innovation to the same table. and they're the ones doing the hard work, right? And so if you are okay with it, I'm going to share my screen and just
Yeah.
show a couple visuals to give our listeners a chance to understand, what the ecosystem actually looks like. So here we go. So as I mentioned, right, we are a statewide ecosystem or alliance, right? And these are really our main clients. These are the governments or the infrastructure owners that we work with every day to source the challenges that are the demand side of this smart cities ecosystem. Again, I don't know if everyone's familiar with Colorado. We have over 600 municipalities in the state. But we work with many of the large ones and many of the small ones. Colorado Springs, City and County of Denver, Denver International Airport, some of the biggest jurisdictions. But we also work with Woodland Park and some of these smaller municipalities that have unique needs, right? Maybe wildfire or water quality monitoring or wildlife collisions are things that they're really concerned with. Whereas the City and County of Denver is focused on very different things. And so by bringing all of these parties together, we create a marketplace. And once you have a marketplace, there's a lot of connections to be made here. And that's our job, is to make valuable connections between partnerships, and to forge partnerships that are testing things in the real world. We also work with many companies, right? The solution providers in this space, startups, as well as large Fortune 500 companies. Usually the uniting factor here is the companies, for their solutions to get to market, to solve a problem, they need government involved. And so we can help them connect their potential solution with a need here in the state. There are really 6 core areas that come up as common themes right now in Colorado where governments are looking for help. And transportation and mobility is absolutely one of the top priorities. We work very closely with transportation and public works agencies here, with Denver International Airport. Aviation and the infrastructure around airports is also a component there. But the connectivity of our communities, the safety of our communities, how we use data to make better decisions, and then the sustainability and the housing market here are all things where we're currently looking for solutions and our priorities for our governments. But ultimately, what we really focus on, because we think it provides the most value to both government and business, are the partnerships, right? That are actually doing real things in the real world and proving whether solutions, are going to solve a problem or not. So we have 78 different projects. They're varied across different needs and different technologies. But a couple of examples here. We've had a lot of success using artificial intelligence and sensors to identify the condition of infrastructure assets like pavement or sidewalk or signage, or graffiti. The city of Greeley is actually using this technology to identify shoes that are hanging on power lines. And so they're training models with this company Iris, that's a Canadian company, to look for certain things from the same field of view of that camera. But I won't go through all of these. There's a lot of different projects out there. I think the point is that this ecosystem has allowed all of these projects to occur that wouldn't have occurred otherwise.
Real quick, Tyler. For instance, you mentioned Centennial here. Does it matter that they built their own fiber optic network to enable these sort of technologies, or is it this develops regardless of the level of network infrastructure?
That's a great question. This project in particular isn't really dependent on that city-owned fiber network. However, the transportation and ITS system that the city of Centennial has is very much dependent on that city-owned fiber network. And they have the ability to look at public-private partnerships, to look at wireless. I know the city is considering how they could maybe use private wireless or other things to complement that fiber network, because they can't connect literally everything to a hard fiber connection.
Mm-hmm. And you have Lidar here That's another technology that I think the audience may not be as familiar with as they should be or can be. Can you just touch base on the LiDAR just for a second? How that's used? Because again, that's I think a critical enabling technology that sort of flies under the radar screen of a lot of people.
Absolutely. I mean, LiDAR has been very popular in the autonomous driving space for a long time. I mean, for those that aren't familiar, LiDAR sensors are using lasers and light and measuring the time it takes for that laser to bounce off objects in real time so you can get very accurate distance between objects and ultimately create what's called a point cloud of the world. And in this case, we're using LiDAR sensors hanging on infrastructure to detect things like pedestrians or bicyclists or scooter users, right? Different types of users in all lighting conditions throughout the day. So cameras, they're great for many things, but at night they don't work as well. Sun glare often provides issues. And so LiDARs are becoming cheaper and cheaper, and we're looking at and testing use cases around near misses between vehicles and people, for example, which is what we're looking at our intersection we have right over here, where we have a couple of LiDARs hanging on a very busy corridor in Denver. But we're also using it to look at things like parking reliability and parking accuracy, or just measuring how many people of different types are using a space. It's very, very valuable and provides a slightly different cost-benefit analysis from what a camera does.
I think you've become a leading expert on the smart city, and what I focus on is the getting to smart, those underlying infrastructure needs, and I think you really lay out some of these use cases that are require the different aspects of the infrastructure. So I appreciate you displaying these.
Yeah, well, and I think each of these projects, as communities start to engage in them, they start to understand the importance of that foundational infrastructure, right? For example, these LiDAR sensors, we're partnered with the city of Denver to hang those, but they're actually using our private 5G wireless network to connect them, so that they can understand how these technologies function prior to them actually writing on the city network and introducing any sort of risk into them. And so wireless is very much a part of almost all of these solutions. Who's providing that connectivity is different for every project, but experiential learning teaches cities quickly about the need for proper data governance and the need for connectivity, whether it's hardwired or wireless. And so that's why we really enjoy focusing on use cases, because it also brings in these other foundational elements.
Well, and it's you hit on a key point, and it takes one organization, institutional or innovation oriented, to sort of lay the groundwork and demonstrate these newer technologies. And I find the adoption rate goes through the roof after about the first year of it being around. When folks hear what it can do, they then get creative and come up with solutions and innovations that you didn't first imagine when you deployed a private wireless network. Is that accurate? Is that what takes place, or you're seeing take place?
Yeah, well, so just speaking of private wireless, so
Mhm.
one of, I mean, in my knowledge, I think it's the largest city-owned private wireless network in the country is in the city of Longmont.
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
worked with one of our partners, Vol Technologies, to design a citywide private wireless network on the back of their city-owned fiber network.
Yep.
And the primary use case for that was connectivity for schools during the pandemic, wireless connectivity and free Wi-Fi. But the city is now using that same private wireless network to connect all of their CCTV cameras, and they're doing it to protect parks and improve public safety. And so that is now going to service as their IoT backhaul, but it wasn't necessarily exactly what they had intended when they first built it for public Wi-Fi.
Yeah, it goes back to the days of the railroad, right? Once you build it, the town starts to build around it, and folks discover new ways once they've gotten to territory. Same thing happens with this communications infrastructure. So, again, you do such a good job of bringing it to the smart, to the application in the field. And I think that your role is essential, and you give too many other markets credit. Um, Too many don't have that sort of neutral convener, facilitator, think group that's action oriented. A lot of universities have folks, and it's all nice and in a little bubble they do things, but you've got it out. I know you did the I-70 project as well, where you did connected cars. And anyway, I'm interrupting. Please go on.
No, I appreciate the praise. Um, so just a couple of programs that allow us to facilitate these partnerships, efficiently, because, to be transparent, one of the challenges of running this organization is there are a lot of people at the table, right? How do you provide value to such a big ecosystem? And this is one of the ways that we try to do that. So governments are often constrained to innovate by the way they buy things, right? Procurement. And the way they normally buy things is through describing exactly the requirements of what they want to buy, which means that they have to really understand exactly what they want to buy. And in the case of innovation and new technology, like artificial intelligence, for example, governments may not be the expert in that field. They may not have ever used something like this. So asking them to, put out a request for information, and companies submit, their biased perspective on what the city should do. They take that data and they write a procurement. And oftentimes they don't know what they're looking for. And so in this case, we're instead just describing the problem that a community has and allowing industry to propose new ideas of how they could solve that problem in a technology-driven way. And so these are 4 challenge statements that we published this year after surveying our governments for what they would be looking for. And things like, the missing middle of affordable housing, how do we better understand the condition of our infrastructure, what is actually happening in our public parks and open spaces, like so we can better maintain them, and then how do we prevent crime? And so we put these out to the market. We have multiple governments that review applications that come in from startups, from big companies all over the world that want to do work here. And all of these governments review those applications that come in. And ultimately, this year we received 80 applications from across the world looking for these partnerships. And so this is a process that we facilitate. And the governments, right, they're the ones that have to do the work to review these things and think about what might work for them. And then ultimately those governments, if they choose a solution, they also pay for those solutions as well. So, the revenue generating opportunities for companies. And just a couple of winners from this year that are just literally being announced today.
It's the largest
is Snowbotics, which is a electric robotic snowplow and maintenance company. They're going to be working with the city of Colorado Springs to do snow removal, as well as sweeping of parking lots and garages, and even looking at snow plowing sidewalks at the top of Pikes Peak, which is 14,000 feet, America's mountain. And so that's an exciting partnership. And then the other one is with a company called City Data that's going to be using mobility data to help them understand visitor trends and how people are using city assets like parks, for example, and transportation corridors. So that's one program. This was our 4th year running it. We look forward to running it again next year. And we usually have applications open in the June-ish timeframe. This was last year's winners and kind of summary of that process. And this is where we get a lot of the projects that come through. In fact, this is the robotic snowplow from Snowbotics that I mentioned that won last year, and they won again this year.
Is that a connected device, or does it just run off computer vision, or how does that operate?
Yeah, I mean, both. So it definitely has an LTE connection at the moment. Although this company is also a graduate of the next program I'll talk about, which is a business accelerator that we run. And they've been looking at using our private 5G network to see how they could move to a more autonomous operation, because right now they're teleoperated or telemonitored at least. And so, today LTE, looking at 5G for tomorrow.
Okay, and then you have intelligent streetlights. I find that to be an essential uh, project that related to communications, because generally when you do the intelligent streetlights, they also look at the utility of the pole and what else they could put on it. And there you get your private 5G network or some sort of sensor network. Can you talk about that project just a little bit? I see
Yeah.
you have up there the small cells, 4G, 5G small cell on the chart.
Yes. So this is a really awesome project. It scaled from a pilot to an over, I think, $200,000 contract, where they're going to be installing smart Jugano lights, and it'll have a private 5G gateway in it from a company called UCast. And then they'll have cameras in there with artificial intelligence from a company called NewReal that is going to be identifying crashes in real time at two of the city of Greeley's most crash-prone intersections, and then integrating with the 911 system to notify personnel of the crash, and also provide video to the first responders so they know how severe that crash may be. And then also, interestingly, to help expedite the cleanup and response, they'll send that as well, that video, and record that video to send to the people who are going to clean up that crash, so they know how serious it might be and they can get that crash cleared as quickly as possible.
And does the city own the poles or does the utility, power utility?
Good question. In this case, I think they are erecting new poles for this project, and so the city will own those poles. But that was a challenge and is a challenge with a lot of the projects in our state, because our big utility is Xcel Energy, and they own most of the streetlights in most cities here in the Front Range.
Yeah, and generally trying to coordinate this level of sophistication is difficult unless the owner of the pole has a vested interest in the multiple solutions. Yeah, so that makes sense that they're putting out new poles with the new capability. Appreciate that insight.
Of course. Yeah, so that is one process that allowed us to create a lot of these partnerships at quite quickly. I'll talk a little bit about one other program, and let me exit out so I don't have to run you through a few slides to get there. We also run a what's called the Smart Futures Lab. It's actually anchored by the University of Colorado, Denver, in downtown Denver. So we're a partner on this with the university, and this is where the university owns and operates their own private 5G network, as well as a co-working space. And we use the campus and the surrounding environment to do testing with startups. And so, Snowbotics is one of the companies that's come through our program. We run an incubator for very early stage entrepreneurs, as well as an accelerator program for more growth stage companies that's funded by the U.S. Economic Development Administration. So it's completely free to companies to participate. And we take them through a 6-month curriculum of how to work with government. We help them find partners that they need in order to develop the right products and to grow as a business. So, some of the traditional accelerator elements you can find out there, but it's very focused specifically on smart cities, which is a hard market to try and get into if you're a startup company. And so this is where we are physically located, and where our offices are, and where I'm speaking from in downtown Denver. We've got a great co-working facility, a prototyping facility, as I mentioned, a private 5G CBRS network that companies can use for R&D, and then the campus as kind of a living laboratory space for people. And we've had around 20 companies come through 2 years of our first 2 cohorts. These are the types of companies that we've had in those cohorts. Really cool technology to detect drones from actually ambient 5G signal. So using radar technology to measure the an object moving through space with just the ambient signal that's already out there. We have a great project actually between Lazarillo, which is a navigation company that's doing that's helping precise navigation for people with disabilities. especially people that are blind. And they are working with Denver International Airport to launch their first project here in the state to help people navigate our very large and busy airport. So that program is open actually right now. So if, I don't know when this is airing, but if companies are interested in getting support from this program, then, it's completely free, and we'll have our third and final cohort of this current program happening in April of this year.
Okay. Yeah, we're probably going to yours will probably get released in March.
Okay. Well, then we'll probably have our companies hopefully selected by then. But it's a great program, and it allows us to work with startups, and it's no cost to them, and we are attracting them based on the needs of our cities. So those are two of the big programs we have. We also operate a membership program for companies that are looking to access this ecosystem, and we can talk more about that if you want.
Well, I think I'd like to, but you're a model, I think, for success. I think you have a relationship with the governor's office. So you've had a great relationship with the broadband office. I mean, you talk a little bit about just, what the barriers are to building it, and then how you work around inside the ecosystem, between government, university, and industry.
Yeah. So, I mean, we operate what we call a coalition of the willing, right? We will work with whoever in government wants to innovate and wants to change, because as you know, Peter, like, in order to do something new in government, it takes a human to navigate the complexities and obstacles to getting something done. And you have to go educate people, right? If you want to use a robot to plow snow, for example, it's like, well, you got to go convince a bunch of public works folks that this is something that's going to benefit them. It's not going to take their job away. So that's just one example. So we've spent 7 years building that coalition of the willing within cities and counties and state offices. And then we've established programs like I just talked about to allow us to work with them and for them to find solutions that they're interested in trying. And that has not been easy. Fundraising and funding an organization like this is a constant challenge. And so that's number one. Like, how do you provide value to everyone? And also, how do you fundraise for that value? It's an interesting business model, and we're not selling anything, but we're also trying to help companies that are selling things.
And how do you then get the funds? Is it government granted? Is it a project oriented? They'll kind of hire you to be part of the initiative. How do you do that? Because I think a lot of folks can't figure out how to get started and get something like yours in place.
Yeah, well, so there are a lot of different ways to do it. There are many models, and I'm sure Jen will talk about hers. And we have pivoted a lot, just like a startup, to figure out how to fund this organization. But when it first started, we were really incubated in what's called Denver South. It's an economic development organization for about 2 years. They contributed existing staff time to getting the organization stood up and recruiting governments to participate. Once we had governments at the table, then we could go to industry and say, hey, look, we have the demand of this marketplace for you. And so we started a membership program with mostly large companies when we started, because in 2016, 2017, right, this was when Verizon and T-Mobile and Charter Spectrum, the telecoms, all had smart cities programs, Dish Network, and that's where we started. But today we've evolved a lot. We work with a lot more startups than we do big companies, mostly because, well, they need our help the most to access these government agencies. And they're also oftentimes the best partners. So we have a tiered membership structure that allows small and big companies to participate. We have grants. So the Department of Commerce and the Economic Development Administration has funded this lab through the university, and that funds a lot of our work. And then we're also looking at those challenges that we run. Nobody pays us to run those today. Interestingly, we do it because it's the right thing to do. But we are going to begin taking, much like Omnia, a percentage of any projects that come through that in the perpetuity of that contract. So many different paths, but it took us 7 years to figure out how to pay the bills.
Well, hats off that you did, because it's certainly helping solve a lot of the issues, and helping us move society along. Because some of these solutions are transformative, and like I said, I personally I've been 40 years in the network side of the business, the connected side. Just marvel at private 5G. I remember when Wi-Fi was a new thing, and I worked in an incubator like you did you do at the University of Pennsylvania. I owned a startup, and I was in the incubator, and I was trying to get funding for a Wi-Fi oriented company that was going to engineer and deploy them. And I was some of the smartest people would have their computer plugged into the wall and say, I don't understand why I need this, right? And yet now with Wi-Fi, the first thing you hear anywhere, you go to the hospital and somebody says, what's the Wi-Fi password? Everywhere you go, it's an essential utility. Well, this private 5G, we all know the promise of 5G. Well, imagine controlling that and being able to put a 5G network where you need it, and not worry about congestion and those sort of aspects in a public network. So I think that's I just love to hear how you've leveraged that and used it for innovation. I think
Yeah, and
10
I
years
think,
from now, everybody's gonna say, why didn't I do this sooner?
well, I think that is something that we are trying hard to educate governments on is, today the status quo is, for example, CDOT, right? Our Department of Transportation, or really any major agency, they have massive IoT bills with Verizon or whoever their carrier might be, and every device has a data plan, and you're paying for that. The promise of a private network is obviously it's more secure if you're operating critical infrastructure, but also, I mean, it can drastically reduce your operational costs over time. And governments are great at capital costs. So
Yeah.
if you can build your own network, especially if you already have your own fiber, it can save a lot of money and improve the security of different use cases like utilities, for example, which is where we're spending time right now trying to help utilities think about how to integrate a private wireless network into their operations.
Love it. Okay, so just you're coming up on time. Um, what intrigues you? What's the most exciting? Everyone right now is talking about AI, and I've had a little bit of experience inside of that, and from machine learning, and then to some of the other elements. People talking about the need for microgrids and all this power, but I don't think AI right now is the most exciting thing the world does. But I gave you my opinion. You tell me what gets you excited. What do you think is helping move the needle in the next couple of years significantly? And maybe it's AI.
So, I mean, I'm going to take a slight pivot on AI. I don't think AI in and of itself is radically changing things today, but here's what I think it's doing. And I talked about this in my event yesterday. The hype curve of different technologies in smart cities has been significant, right? In 2016, it was IoT, electrification, automation, right? Every city was thinking, how do I deal with every car being autonomous and electric today in 2025? And obviously, we're not quite there, but it's changing industries. And that hype curve was drastic. And I think cities were really interested. They tried some things that didn't solve all their problems, and they were, disinterested for, the last several years. Artificial intelligence has created an excitement. I think it's democratized this innovation culture and the desire to try things and to be innovative and to use this tool that's very easily accessible and pretty affordable. And so I think that momentum, that hype that AI is providing cities right now is going to open their eyes to all of the innovations that are influencing infrastructure, whether it's private wireless or artificial intelligence or generative AI. There's a lot of tools out there, and I want government to open their eyes to all of them and figure out how to use them.
Okay, that's I like your take on that, and I think, AI is part of the smart, right? And we're trying to get there with the networks and the infrastructure. Um, I think we've got a ways to go before we can harness all the promise, even the low end of the promise there. But like you said, that's all that annoys me. As an old guy, I've watched this hype cycle over and again, and I've watched the shorts, so to speak, come in at the back end of a hype cycle and grab a really successful technology that the world's down on now, and investors have lost money because the time frame to hit that inflection point is generally almost always longer. And if it's not, then you got a whole nother set of issues with such rapid growth. But that sort of annoys me to watch a hype cycle. I think there's a lot more important things we could be talking about, just like the private 5G networks that are just enabling so much creativity and so much growth. But okay, that said, any final thoughts? Any words for the wise out there, if you would? Words to copy, if you would.
I think I've spent my entire career in what you would call smart cities. And in every role that I've had, and especially in this one, I've seen the need for partnership. And I see that word used a lot. I don't see it actually being played out the way partnerships should be played out, right? There is a mutual need between government and industry. And oftentimes it's a vendor relationship. And governments need help. They need to be educated about what's possible. And companies need help to build the right products and to understand how to work with government so we can accelerate the pace at which these things are adopted. And so I would encourage people to be better partners with each other, especially in government. It's government's job, in my opinion, to partner and to solve these challenges in new ways. And they need industry to do it. And so, the traditional ways of, buying things and collaboration need to change. And I'm happy to be running an organization that I think facilitates the right kind of partnership here in Colorado.
Well, then I'm going to go in one more time because the private public cooperation and partnership is also one of those things that I shake my head at, because oftentimes, and I just experienced this on the government side, a key player, the driver, the innovator, left the government, that particular government, and everything fell on the floor. Nobody got it. Nobody wanted to touch it. And it was it was a $19 million initiative. And once that driver went, that initiative just got watered down and kind of filtered out, and then people started picking off the money and putting it into other projects, and that was sad. And same on the other side of the partnership, you see these organizations come in, big firm, global billions and this, and they have one visionary, and then that visionary gets caught up in some politics or changes jobs or has an illness, and then that organization is like, well, nobody really got that, and because it's not the main revenue driver, it just sort of goes away again. How much volatility do you see with sort of that one key partner, the individual in these organizations, keeping the momentum? And when those people leave, how do you insulate against the momentum dying? Yeah.
It's a great point. I have seen many stories on both sides of partnerships falling apart because of human being change, right? I was involved with a $70 million project, one of the biggest in the country, between a Fortune 500 company and between one of our biggest state governments. And the administration changed, no longer wanted to focus on that. And the partnership doesn't exist anymore. Same thing on the other side. Large corporations change strategy constantly. Narrowband IoT was a big thing.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden it became 5G, and cities are left hanging dry. So I think one of the ways that I've learned to try and insulate these things is that partnerships are really important. The more parties you have involved in a partnership, the stronger it is, right? So if you've got, for example, the state and an automaker and a software company and, private network operator, like, partnerships are good and they're healthy. They're hard, but they are more sustainable in the long term because it's harder to turn 5 organizations down than it is one. So that's one thing I've learned.
Well, I think you made the most timely comment there. Is when you have a change in administration, certainly things change, and I think we're in that position in America today. So a lot of unknowns and a lot of knowns. So I really appreciate you helping bring clarity and success to these difficult, innovative steps out in the real market. So thanks again for joining us. Hope you get some good skiing in. I, alas, am not coming out this year to Colorado, but thank you so much for all that you do, Tyler. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Peter, for the opportunity.
All right, take care.